visual world. We are in a strange moment in history where acceptance is necessary. It gives us a chance to observe on where we are in the world, realizing the importance of being comfortable within our own surroundings, noticing the impact that good design has on our communities. Today, more than ever, we pay attention to objects that include an aspect of sustainability and have a sense of social cautiousness. In August 2019, it came to me that I wanted to be a part of this enigma. At the beginning of my last year in Bali, I got the chance to travel to Japan with my mother and her guests. My mother is a guide for Belgian tourists who like to visit Japan and learn more about this amazing country. It was great to have a Japanologist right by our side. Now, I got super inspired by the way the culture of the country developed into what it is today. There were times when the innovation in infrastructure left me speechless. We traveled through 10 different cities and villages in about 3 weeks. We usually rode by these high-speed trains called Shinkansens. These beautifully designed trains travel up to 320 kilometers an hour. And our trip included visiting many different temples, parks, nature habitats, lakes, mountains, museums, memorials, and 2 art islands. These art islands are called Naoshima and Teshima. They are located in the inland sea of Japan and both have a population of about 1,000 people. While going to all these beautiful places, it was important for me to capture these moments. And about a week into the trip, my mother gifted me a notebook for me to journal. I started writing every night after our long days while also collecting small folders and receipts, helping me form my day in my journal. As every day was a brand new experience. Now I came upon the word wabi-sabi. I had seen it somewhere and became curious but couldn't quite remember what it meant. I asked my mother about it and she answered with, "It is basically seeing the perfection in the imperfection." This made me want to learn much more about this Japanese concept, so I did. The saying is related to Rikyu's teaism. Rikyu is a cult of teaism that was known to be about the worship of wealth. As time changed, Japan raised this cult into a religion of aestheticism. It came to be about worshipping simplicity and accepting reality. Wabi-sabi is the recognition of the beauty that the true nature of life reflects, to acknowledge the imperfect, impermanent, and the incomplete. The Japanese saying, it gave me an insight on both culture and soul. Now I found that it's a bit like love. I could explain how it is to me or how it feels to me, but it's only when you find it yourself that you really know. It is a concept which allows people to slow down and investigate to find potent wisdom in your everyday life. Wabi-sabi has impacted me greatly, and I found myself creating in a much more mindful state. During the trip, we visited a beautiful museum on the island Naoshima. The building was partly designed by a Japanese architect, Tadao Ando. Tadao Ando expresses the saying of wabi-sabi in many of his works, as he uses architectural aspects of the spirit Sukiya, which is a simple tea house design originated in the 16th century. It is not only found in the exterior of his work, but plays a prominent role in the interior of his creations, above all in the furnishing and treatments of light. As the exterior is composed of smoothly finished concrete walls, the interior as well is constructed of a floor, walls, and ceiling of exposed concrete. A traditional style is not employed, but he had the intention to receive the true character of these tea houses through the three-dimensional composition of spaces, details, and distribution of light and darkness. Now, these concepts made me very curious about what design really is. I got inspired by these beautiful complex structures which were yet so minimalistic. With this knowledge and aspiration, I came back to Bali, with the idea in mind to design a piece of furniture for my Greenstone project. The ideation process brought me to drawing a simple sketch of a chair, literally just an outline. I did not include any scale, materials, or dimensions. Not knowing what to expect, I sent it over to industrial designer and educator, Scott Vanderbilt. Now, he noticed that I was going too fast down the road of design. As he explained, let's first study many ideas before choosing one. Engage in a process of ideation, then we can refine the design idea. Now, I felt curious and motivated by his comments, and Scott showed me how to work with orthographic drawings and how to use a scale ruler. He also gifted me a copy of The Elements of Design, a book documenting the teaching of industrial designers and educators, Rowena and Alexander Costello. They spent half a century developing and clarifying a teaching methodology that they named the structure of visual relationships. Now, I soon realized this study was on the understanding of beauty, a beauty that lays within asymmetrical abstract relationships. During this study, I learned to appreciate how to see the power in moving one's eye around objects and form by finding and engaging a visual balance in three-dimensional composition. As Rowena Reed quotes, "If you can't make it beautiful, what's the point?" I will be showing you the process I went through in investigating some of the exercises within this book. The first is an exercise of organizing a selection of 3 rectilinear volumes. The intention is to find constructive balance in a combination of contrasting forms. I started off by selecting 3 beautiful rectilinear components that vary in proportion discretely, to then initiate the relationships by identifying the dominant, subdominant, and the subordinate. You can identify the dominant with it being the largest, most dramatic, and engrossing. This component stands in the most superior position of the group. The subdominant is there to complement the dominant in its form. The relationship that they have is extraordinary, as the contrasts in these characters are meant to be complementary towards each other. The value of this connection is increased when the axes are static. The subordinate adds a third visual aspect to the design. It is there to make up for what is missing, to have 3 perpendicular axes within this problem. This practice gave me a sense of overall configuration. It is seen in my first attempt that I didn't quite have the understanding yet. Over time, I analyzed and refined my compositions to ensure unity and a balance of directional forces. As industrial designer and professor at Pratt Institute, Gerald Belota quotes, "Once you've had the experience, you can destroy the exercise, and you haven't lost anything." Can you imagine how liberating that idea is? Well, it gave me a way of visually understanding abstract design from a designer's point of view. In Block 4 of Grade 12, I was ready to put my knowledge into form. A blank sheet of paper, a pen, and myself. A second try to designing a chair. I faced many issues, such as not knowing how to calculate a certain bend, or having to consider ergonomics. A chair has to be light, strong enough to hold a person's weight, and it needs to be comfortable. Using 3 different types of material, which each of them acting in a different manner. Recycled plastic panels for the seat, bamboo splits for the legs, which were shaped with an epoxy, and metal strips for the frame. All of these components were created to the exact inherent proportions of my design. Now, this project has given me the chance to explore the reality of creating, as I found myself in a cycle of collaborating with other makers and craftsmen. It was a journey that involved all of the skills that Green School has taught me. It was truly a battle. As Ludwig Mies van der Rohe quotes, "A chair is a very difficult object. A skyscraper is almost easier." Plato, however, wanted more. Instead of a thing simply matching a definition or concept, for him it matched the relevant form or idea. All chairs in the everyday sensible world are imperfect instances of the perfect form of a chair, which exists in the intelligible world of forms. So, what makes a chair a chair? Is it that it is an imperfect copy or instance of the chair form? It partakes of that form. What I've learned through this process is that design comes down to how we preserve things. A lot of the time we see and talk subjectively, but what really matters is the objective truth. To focus on what is really there by using language to discuss not only what we think. Talk about what you know rather than what you think. By communicating this way, we can focus on the important, hereby to share that the visual appeal of products, situations, and even workplaces have been found to have an impact on your productivity and your mood. Now, I want to inspire communities to become more socially cautious to what they design, to bring forward the idea of using ecologically responsible materials, as design is also a part of serving others and engaging in community issues by using our ability to recognize problems and solving them. To become a part of shaping a better future, as I have a passion to work with authentic and sustainable mediums. As Frank Chimera quotes, "People ignore designs that ignore people," and I don't want to ignore the responsibility that comes along with being a designer, and the privilege of servicing a community through the process and its fruition, and all its wabi-sabi. As a result of this, I want to follow a similar path within my own visual language. And on that note, I'm glad to announce that I'll be attending the Design Academy of Eindhoven to follow my interests in an international and professional environment, because this journey will never have an end to it.
Kusazangpo. This is how we say hello from where I come from. I'm from Bhutan, this tiny country in the Himalayas, and the outfit you see here is a national dress of Bhutan. Right now, when I said Bhutan, some of you who might have already heard of Bhutan would have probably immediately associated Bhutan with happiness. And that's probably because Bhutan is well known for its philosophy on happiness. It's funny, when I first came to Green School, and when I introduced myself as someone from Bhutan, people would immediately react like, "That's so cool," and ask me questions like, "How is it like living in a land of happiness? And are you guys happy all the time? And, well, are you happy all the time?" You have to admit, these are really hard questions to answer in a very casual conversation. So I would just give them vague responses that didn't really count as an answer. And because I didn't have a proper way to answer these questions. And these small instances, they really stuck with me. So when the time came for me to choose a Greenstone topic, I chose happiness, because I thought it would be really cool if I could find a way to answer these questions. And the next time someone asks me those questions, I'll be ready for it with an answer. I first started off by researching gross national happiness, GNH. Gross national happiness is a philosophy that our fourth king founded, and it expresses how the well-being and the happiness of the people should be prioritized over GDP and how much money a country makes. And this philosophy is supported by 4 pillars: environment, culture, economic development, and government. Next, I looked into the World Happiness Report, WHR. The World Happiness Report is a report that has data and information compiled from happiness surveys that have been conducted throughout the world. And this year's WHR focused on 3 things: social environment, urban happiness, and natural environment. Next, I looked into the Balinese philosophy of Trita Karana, which literally translates to the 3 causes of prosperity and happiness. And this philosophy centered around the balance and harmony between human and God, human and nature, and human and human. But, And since these 3 concepts are so similar, I decided to combine all 3 and categorize them into 3 different factors. As you can see here, social factors, which have cultural, community, society, and government; nature, how it affects us, how we can preserve it, and our connection with nature; and financial, because whether we like it or not, the world runs on money, and access to good education, good health, luxuries, and services, all of them are dependent on money. And these 3 factors, as you can see here, they influence our happiness, our state of happiness, and they equip us with a space in which it's a conducive environment where we can pursue our own happiness. But at this point, I felt like I was rather disconnected from my own project. I was focusing too much on the happiness of other people and the happiness of the general society. And I felt like I was missing from my own project. So I moved away from that. I looked into what other people had done to be happy. I listened to podcasts about how to become happy. I read this book about how this lady tried to find happiness by changing the little things around her. And through that, I realized that in addition to the 3 factors I mentioned earlier, there was another factor that I had completely neglected: a person's characteristics, their traits, their personality, attitude, or in other words, individualism. With that thought in mind, I decided to have my own little happiness project, Operation Let's Become Happy. It's a bit obvious, but it does the job. So, the first step, I wanted to observe myself, my state of happiness. So I kept this journal where I recorded when I was happy, what made me happy, and what I needed to become happy. But as soon as I started this, COVID-19 appeared out of nowhere and forced us all into isolation. And I thought, I admit I'm an introvert and a bit unsocial at times, and I have a small circle of friends, but I'm okay with that. In fact, I'm even proud of it. And it's because I had this weird, bizarre pride that, I thought I was immune to loneliness. I thought since I didn't need to be around people all the time, I thought I was immune to loneliness. I can't be lonely at all. So that led me to this bizarre pride in which I kind of convinced myself I wasn't lonely, even though I really was. And at that point, I was facing so many emotions that I didn't want to face. I was learning so many things about myself that I didn't want to acknowledge. I can't say I really like my project at this point. So on to the next step, implementing action. So basically, I wanted to do things that would make me happier and a little bit cheer me up and make me a little bit more happier. I hate to admit it, but at this point, I was really behind on my Greenstone, and I thought, since it was really stressing me out, so I thought if I worked on my Greenstone, then I could get rid of all of the extra stress and anxiety and become a little bit more happier. So I deprived myself of any joyous activities. I completely focused on my work. I was going to do it. I was going to finish my Greenstone quickly and then try to become more happier. But that failed miserably because, I was too bummed out to work on a topic like happiness. So my next brilliant idea was basically focus, just do everything I can to be happy. I watched anime, I bought myself a new video game, bought a mountain load of junk food. I started reading a book series, I explored my creative side. It was all fun and good, but Thing is, new problem was I was too busy having fun to actually do work. My next solution, create a daily schedule that divided time equally between work and play. But then I found out I had terrible self-control and self-discipline because I was too, I couldn't even stick to the schedule for more than 2 days. So there was a question of work or happiness. Which one should I focus more on? But my work was on happiness, so it was very confusing. So I chose happiness. And my new solution was basically do whatever I feel like doing and just hope for the best. It's a miracle that I even finished my project on time. As I mentioned earlier, I had this weird pride about not being lonely that convinced me that I wasn't lonely, and because of that, whenever I wanted to reach out to my family or my friends or message them or call them, something inside me was stopping me from calling them because, well, if I wasn't lonely, why was I trying to call them? So because of that, I was subconsciously pulling myself away from my family and friends. So after I realized what I was doing, I completely changed my tune and I decided to make this resolution of calling my family or my friends at least once a day. And because of that, I had a proper talk with my parents, and I realized that by being sad and pushing everyone away, I was hurting them, and I was making them really worried. So I decided so whenever I call them now, I would put on a brave face, smile, and say, I'm happy and healthy, don't worry about me. And the strange thing is, when I started doing that, I actually became a little bit more happier because I was setting their minds at ease, I was easing their worries, and it made me happy. The one thing I've been dreading during this entire project was implementing positive thinking. So, first, I had to accept my circumstances. Despite my many efforts to try to go home, well, I'm still here, so far away from home. And that's the situation. I have to accept it. Next, adopt a less sulky attitude with less wallowing in self-pity and sorrow, and try to be a little bit more cheerful. And silver linings. Things could have been a lot more worse for me, but it isn't worse. And I should be grateful for that. I am grateful for that. And there's no point in me dwelling in all these circumstances that I can't control. These are all out of my control. So rather than focusing on that, well, rather than dwelling on these unpleasant things, I should dwell on more pleasant things, like the new anime episodes that came out last week. And lastly, a little hope. Just have some hope that one day things will go back to normal and everything will be all right, and maybe I'll finally be able to go back home someday. So, what was the point of my project? Well, after a year of working with the topic of happiness, I've gained some familiarity with it. So here's how I think about happiness. There are two types of happiness. There is long-term happiness and short-term happiness. Long-term happiness is like this happiness that's sustained over a long period of time, and it's assured by stability and security, and people are free to pursue their own individual happiness. Whereas short-term happy, it's those bursts of positive emotions you feel that was caused by an immediate catalyst or a cause, and it's heavily reliant on your happy hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, serotonin, and they're normally released when you are doing things you enjoy or spending time with people you like. Because of this project, I realized I am so blessed. I'm so very, very lucky because conditions for my long-term happiness are already set in place. I was born to a wonderful and caring family. I was born in a country blessed with nature, in a beautiful country that's ruled by a fair and gracious king, where the government prioritizes the happiness and the well-being of the people over capita per income. And I had the amazing opportunity to spend the last 3 years in such an incredible school. So I am truly blessed. And for my short-term happy, I'm a person with simple needs. So as long as I get to spend time with my family, friends, read books, play games, watch anime, I'm pretty happy. But my happiness project wasn't all fun and games. There were times when I regretted starting a happiness project. When I had asked myself the question of, am I happy? I was forced to confront feelings and emotions I didn't want to acknowledge. I had to learn things about myself that I wish I didn't knew. And there were those times when I was consumed by feelings of helplessness, grief, frustration, anxiety, uncertainty. The lockdown happened. Everyone was going home. I wanted to go home, but I couldn't. All the airports were closed. And then I was expected to sit down and work on a happiness project when I was feeling anything but happy. Well, at times it was hard. The happiness project was hard at times. But now, when I look back at these things, I realize that this entire project was an opportunity for me to learn about myself, to learn about my flaws, the little things that were making me unhappy, to work on them. Before I started the project, I thought I was happy. Then during the project, I realized the truth wasn't quite that simple. There were flaws, there were chances for me to become happy, but I wasn't taking those chances because of my own little habits, presumptions, perceptions, actions. But now, I'm a little bit more aware of them, and I can do something to change it. I'm really glad that I chose this topic, this happiness project. And yes, I don't regret it at all. Coming back to my title, if you're happy and you know it, don't clap your hands yet. You might be wrong. But that's okay, because acknowledging the truth and then moving forward is the first step. After that, well, your happiness is in your hands. Trust me. Thank you for listening to my talk.
I arrived at the Green School 10 years ago, when I was 7 years old. I had just moved to Bali from Singapore, and while I can't really remember what those first few months at Green School were like, all my mom tells me is that I turned feral. 10 years later, there are 3 things I have been consistently known for: having long curly hair, being distracted during class, and always asking questions. I feel I have been asking questions forever. All kinds of questions. Useful questions, silly questions, distracting questions, you name it. You know the way a toddler asks the question why over and over again? I still love asking why and the journey of discovery it takes me on. I ask questions everywhere, to Google, to my friends, to my parents sometimes, and of course at school, to my teachers. Usually my questions are appreciated by the teacher, and I even feel it enriches the experience for the other students. But sometimes teachers have kindly, or not so kindly, asked me to stop asking questions, either because this is the 5th question I've asked in the past 5 minutes, or because they need to get on with class. There have been 1 or 2 times where my questions have been shut down, and I was left feeling humiliated. You can bet that I didn't ask any questions in those classes again, and I ended up learning nothing, I hated being there, and I bombed the class. Being the curious guy I am, when I entered high school and discovered that there was a class called LEAP, where I could literally ask any question I wanted and then try to answer it through research or a project, I was so excited. LEAP stands for Let's Eat Amazing Pizza. It sounds kind of random, partly because it was created by a LEAP student, but it reflects our personality of just going for it and having fun as we learn. Thankfully, our LEAP teacher, Mo, prefers this one over the very boring original acronym: Lean, Entrepreneurial, Action-Based, and Product-Oriented. Even though we have a lot of freedom in LEAP, there is structure that fosters our curiosity, and it starts with a pitch. We are pitched ideas from the community and from each other, and then through our project autopsy process, where we dissect each idea through a set of questions, we are able to decide what we want to focus on. Then we work on our project all day, every day, for 6 full weeks. For example, the focus of my first sleep was the ocean. We started with a broad question of what do we want to learn about the ocean? The answer? Marine life, which took us to the beach, where we snorkeled and came back with footage of an octopus, giving us plenty to research and learn about. We agreed that snorkeling didn't allow us enough time underwater, which led to us sticking our heads in bowls of water to see how long we could hold our breath, before eventually signing up for a freediving course. With our freediving qualification and marine life knowledge, we then asked ourselves, how can we put this to good use? The answer? Creating artificial reefs in North Bali to encourage coral growth and marine life. That is just one example of what can happen through LEAP, and I have gained so many new interests and passions for things I never knew I was interested in. My favorite part of being in LEAP is being able to ask all sorts of questions. I love that sometimes a simple question like, can we go catch ants now, can lead to a 3-week journey of finding alternative and sustainable food sources. But asking a question like, should I drink from this old bottle of sparkling water, can lead to me choking for 2 minutes. And although it wasn't the smartest thing to do, I still learned something. LEAP is a self-led experience, where we have the freedom to experiment and be curious, with no fear of grades. And even though we do have a teacher, they are more like a project facilitator, who learns with us instead of teaching us. Over the past 3 years, I've participated in LEAP 8 times. Each block lasts 6 weeks, which is great, because as a team, we have to stay motivated and productive, while communicating and solving problems creatively. It was important to make the most of our time with each project in order to succeed. I feel that all these life skills will be incredibly useful in any of my future professions and relationships. But most importantly, my LEAP experience has grown my confidence to the point where I can be thrown into any team project and apply myself effectively. It's made me realize that my curiosity is a superpower. When it finally came to Greenstone, I was excited to be able to take these skills and focus on a project that I could really sink my teeth into for a whole year. I knew it had to be something I was curious about to keep me interested and motivated. My first idea was to customize a van, but then I lost motivation. My second idea was to build a sustainable building, but I soon lost my motivation. My third idea was to build a pool for the school. While I did get the furthest on this project, I did start to lose motivation again, until PACMO gave me a friendly push in the right direction, and I was able to start making connections and ended up with a pool squad of helpers. At this moment, my motivation for the project came back, and it's when I realized that I'm pretty great at managing a project and working hard on it, but only if I have a team working with me. I hadn't anticipated that working solo would be my least favorite part about Greenstone. If there's one thing LEAP has taught me, it's that completing milestones and having success as a community is much more rewarding than on your own. So, my pool project was finally getting somewhere, but then thanks to coronavirus, school shut down. After a week, I realized that my project wasn't possible anymore and I had to start from scratch again. To be honest, I was disappointed that my project couldn't continue, but I feel that through LEAP, where I had experienced projects failing in the past, I now had the skills to quickly reevaluate, adapt, and bounce back when necessary. By March, I had spent 2 LEAP blocks studying fermentation. The first block, we looked at sustainable and alternative foods, where we ended up making lots of different cheeses. And in the second block, we looked at ethanol-based biofuels by fermenting different biomasses and even tried making our own mead. So, as I was considering what to do for my next Greenstone, it occurred to me I had only scratched the surface of fermentation, and I still had tons of questions that I was curious to find the answers to. It seemed like the perfect project for me, and it would be easy to work on from home. When I told Ibu Harriet and PACMO of my decision, they thought it was a great idea, but I think they were definitely sold when I told them I was going to name it Fermentation. So I had my idea, and I was excited to see where it would take me. I had no clue how many things could be fermented, and wasn't quite sure where to start, until PACMO, my ferment sensei, once again put me on my path by sending me a bunch of recipes on what I could ferment. For people who aren't familiar with what it is, fermentation began as the way food was preserved and stored before refrigeration came along. It is the metabolic process of turning carbohydrates into alcohol and lactic acid. So that means starch and sugars are chemically broken down by yeast and bacteria and produce either lactic acid or alcohol and carbon dioxide. Simply put, yeast eats carbs and produces alcohol and CO2, which is just bubbles, and bacteria eats carbs and produces lactic acid, which gives that sour or tangy taste in a lot of fermented foods. Many of the foods and drinks we consume today are in fact fermented and come from all around the world. Things like kombucha, yogurt, cheese, kimchi, Tabasco, and tempeh. Every region of the world has their own form of fermentation. I knew how fermentation worked, but I didn't know where it came from, so I decided to look into the history. And what better place to start than with something I was already making, mead. Mead is mainly made from honey, and it's the oldest alcoholic beverage on the planet. Traces of it were found in 9,000-year-old pottery jars in northern China, but it is referenced in many ancient cultures. The Greek god of wine, Bacchus, was the god of mead long before wine. In Norse mythology, mead provided the gift of poetry and composition. Even the term honeymoon comes from newlyweds drinking mead to get a little more comfortable with each other after their wedding. There is so much history just on one drink, and I discovered so much more about the whole world of fermentation. I was so curious and engrossed with the history that I hadn't even thought about the health benefits. Fermented foods are full of microorganisms, bacteria, and yeast, otherwise known as probiotics. Once again, my curiosity was sparked. I didn't know that much about gut health, but I definitely didn't know that our gut contains trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Having an immune system full of diverse and healthy bacteria, which fermented foods can provide, is so crucial to protect ourselves from harmful pathogens. And at a time like this, with COVID, I believe that it is so important to keep curious about our body to remain healthy and in balance. So I was learning a lot on my own, which was great, but as I mentioned before, the thing that really keeps me motivated long-term is working with a team. But because I couldn't really see anyone due to COVID, I needed to find an online community for myself. I joined 2 parent group chats on fermentation and sourdough, which was great. I was even talking to fellow classmates about it because they had questions about fermentation. But most importantly, I had my mentor, Mo, who I continued to direct my curiosity at. And to be fair, sometimes I could have figured it out on my own, sure. But being able to share what I had done and ask questions to people who share my interest made the whole process all the more enjoyable and interesting. I've spent the past 2 months testing and trying different fermented foods and drinks. And here I'd like to show you some of the stuff I've done. This whole project started because I was still curious about something I did in class, and my curiosity continued to drive me to keep discovering new things. Although learning about fermentation was a fantastic experience and it was one of the best projects I've ever worked on, I feel I could have done this Greenstone with any project. Let me explain. The thing that motivated me through this project wasn't a lifelong passion for fermentation, although I think I may have acquired one now, but it was just something else that ignited my curiosity. It could have been about glass making, gardening, or freediving. It didn't matter. The important thing is that I was curious about it and I wanted to learn more. Now, not everyone is like me, and there's a reason why many feel shy to ask a question in front of a room. The truth is that standard education does a horrible job at fostering children's curiosity, with too much focus on content-driven curriculums and having correct answers. By the time kids are in primary school, more often than not, their curiosity has been extinguished. And yet, research shows that curiosity is one of the strongest markers for academic success. The effect of squashing curiosity is that people tend to simply accept what is told to them, denying them the ability to cultivate their own opinions and the opportunity to learn to love learning, not to mention the countless number of adventures asking questions can take you on. I've been very lucky. My parents, the people around me, and my teachers have consistently expected and encouraged my curiosity to lead the way I learn. My fermentation journey is the culmination of 10 years at the Green School, where I have gathered millions of pieces of knowledge, all which, for serious love for learning, in a fun and warm environment, has fermented me into who I am today. Very much a hungry learner, forever grateful for eating all that amazing pizza. Thank you.
I was 2 years old when my brother was born. I was fussy and easy to cry. Then I raised by my grandfather, so my mother can focus to taking care of my little brother. Every night, I used to sleep with my grandmother and listen her stories. She likes to tell stories about her youth, when there were invaders in Bali, and about of difficulty of getting food, and much more. This is one of story that is interesting to me. The story starts with a bang. Dar! That's how my grandmother told me the story when she was herding her cows. She was still very young at that time. She thought she was safe from the bomb explosion by the invaders. Half of her body was in the mud because she jumped to the rice paddy when the explosion happened. This story is interesting to me, not because my grandmother was safe from the explosion, but because I knew the sound was not from the bomb. However, it was the eruption of Man Agung in 1963. She forget. But I realized she will forget more and more. That moment where I felt, before she forget more, I want to be able to make her story lasting and continue to be remembered for all time. Now, I have a little time just for talking with my grandmother. And I feel I cannot let this happen. I miss my childhood, when I had plenty time to listen my grandmother's stories. But I realize my grandmother's stories are not the only one. There are a lot of inspiring, interesting stories from grandparents in Bali. Stories that we must share, that we must save and remember and told back to our next generation. This motivated me to visit various regencies in Bali, meet and talk with grandparents, and became a listener to their beautiful stories. My journey started at the very end of the western part of Bali Island. I met two beautiful women who are very cheerful and friendly, Niang Bajang and Niang Ayu. Niang said, "Now I'm the only one who's still weaving. I started weaving at the age of 15, and most of my niece weave for school fees. And when they finish high school, they stop weaving. They go to city to work." There are not just stories, but also make our generation aware of our own cultural heritage. How do you feel seeing this picture? Talking about simplicity of life, saying the situation as it is today, I remember the story of Dadong Ketut in Gianyar. A story about cooperation, helping each other. The story is simple, and maybe we have experienced it some point in our life. Grandma Ketut said, "I live in village. I get my daily needs from my garden. I don't need to buy things, as most of the stuff I make by myself. If I cannot get something from my garden or cannot make by myself, there are relatives and neighbors who I can ask. I don't need much. The important thing is to have enough." Communal life and sharing really happen. I, myself, experienced it. Many young people around me start working on an empty land behind their houses. They mingle with their grandfathers who first start gardening. They collaborate and learn together. When they harvest what they plant, the yield was never enjoyed by themselves alone. They always share. Anyone can help themselves. Just take enough so the others can also enjoy the harvest too. Lessons like this, I do not always get at school. The concept of mutual cooperation, sharing, harmony with environment, as well as preserving culture. Implementing and experiencing it firsthand is a rare moment. Nothing is wrong, but sometimes It can make us less sensitive with our surroundings. If you want to start, you can do simple and easy things. Be a good listener. Listen the story, complaints, hopes of our grandparents. Then, with the knowledge and technology that we have, perhaps we are able to become a hope for them, to continue to preserving and sustain the culture. The beautiful stories of grandparents that I met, I captured into a book, which is still in process. A book that summarizes a various feelings of grandparents during their lifetimes. The stories are not only their daily routines, but also how they make sense of life. Struggle, loyalty, persistence, hope, love are some of values that we can see from their stories. Come, be close to them. Remember the sweet memories with them. Ask a lot of things. We might be surprised at their answer. Believe me, everyone will grow old, but no one hopes to grow old lonely. My name is Cynthia, and I'm proud to be grandchildren of my Peka and Dadong. Thank you.
There is a moment, or should I say, moments, when you feel like you don't fit in, either to the coolest group of school or that others mock at you because on how you dress. Or you might feel embarrassed when others mock you because of your culture and ethnicity. Then you might start to feel insecure, reflect, and ask, am I not good enough? Then you decided to talk to another person about it. And the advice they will say is just be yourself. You know, sounds easy, right? Just be yourself. Walk the way you walk, talk the way you talk, do what you love to do, dress on how you want to display yourself. You might think it's amazing until you realize that our society often encourages uniformity. In fact, only in the last 50 years that there have been steps to embrace diversity. Only in 1964 that the Civil Rights Act is signed in the United States. Apartheid is ended just in 1994 in South Africa. In the year of 2000, we, the Chinese Indonesian ethnic, don't need to hide anymore to celebrate our new year after a long year of
history of discrimination and persecution. In fact, right in the year of 2020, we can still see that we have a long way to go before people can be who they truly are. People are still unsafe in certain places just because the color of their skin, the people they love, or what they believe in. Although I'm sure you already know this, but being yourself is not easy. In my opinion, being yourself means you can display your identity freely and pursuing what you love without any fear. But what is identity? From what I read, identity is a combination of memories, experiences, relationships, and values that create one sense of a self. To understand our identity, we ask ourselves a question that we've been trying to answer. Who am I? I walked through Green School one day, stressing out that I can't finish some assignment on time. I feel like I just wanted to swear. Then I stopped for a second. And my mind said, this is not Angel. Who have you become? For me and my peers, the question of who am I often pops in our head as we try to figure out our identity and what our role is in society. In Erik Erikson's Psychosocial development theory, the age between 13 to 21 is the stage of identity versus role confusion, where we start to break from our childhood beliefs and start adopting our own. It is essential for us to experiment, and the experimentation stage is called moratorium by James Marcia, Adolescent Identity Development, where we teenagers feel an identity crisis, explore various commitments, ready to make a choice but haven't made it yet. The exploration process is crucial for us teenagers. Enough exploration and experimentation will result in one's having a good sense of who they are and what they want to do in the future. But on the other hand, not having enough exploration can cause role confusion, where they don't know what they wanted to do in the future. One way for us teenagers to express our identity and experiment is to decorate our bedroom. We put a poster of our favorite bands, a picture of our loved ones, or even a post-it notes of our Greenstone. You see, a teenage bedroom is not only a corner we occupied. It is a gallery of thoughts, an exhibition of our changing personality. It is saying, this is who I am. I am my own person, even though I'm not 100% sure who it is yet. My project began in the relation of physical space to our identity. A light bulb sparked during an LGBT class called Drag Mafia and the Glitter Dikes, where I planned to make a design of a space, telling the story of one person's identities to understand what it feels like to be them. However, 6 weeks is not enough, and I adopted this project into my Greenstone. At this point, I want to make it personal. I want to explore myself, my own identity. Growing up, I never feel like I belong to any group of school. It feels like there's a flaw in me that needs to be fixed. I wake up every day trying to be perfect, to slip on the character of Angel that everybody sees, scared that if I wasn't good enough, I would never belong anywhere. The mission of my project is for me to feel whole again and to be able to see the beauty in me. And finally, be who I truly am. But I bring 3 of my friends in this project to see them through their own eyes of what makes them who they are. I wonder what they think of themselves. As I graduate, this will be my last gift. But why physical space? Throughout my Greenstone year, I have an interest in architecture, the art of shelter and hope. As a human, a shelter is a basic necessity, a place of security. Throughout our life, we are not only creating a shelter, but we're also creating a home. Like when you were a child, creating a hideout where maybe you can have a tea party every day, or maybe a pirate base, and it becomes a special place to you. When you become a teenager, your room becomes a concert stage. The wall fill in with all of your interests. Then you reach adulthood, where maybe you can finally have your own home, a place where you can manage your own. But what is the difference between shelter and a home? Shelter is a building that's designed to protect ourselves from dangers such as the extreme weather. But a home, told by David Seaman in his Phenomenology of Home, are feelings. A culmination of security, the quality of rootedness, a sense of ownership, restoration, feeling at ease, and warmth. The book, House as a Mirror of the Self, said a home fulfills 3 needs: a refuge from the outside world, a vessel of memories, and a place of self-expression. So our home should be a place where we can just be ourselves, because the objects that we put in our home and the objects that we surround ourselves with is a reflection of who we are, although it might act as a disguise of who we truly are. When I began my project, I wanted to listen to other people's stories, the stories that what make them who they are, and I turned it into design of a space. But collecting significant stories that make a person alive is not easy. You see, many of us arrive from where we are, but haven't looked back to the road that got us here. It takes more than a normal conversation or just an interview to have these stories to appear. I need to guide my friend to bring up these memories to make sure it's personal without crossing their boundaries. So the structure needs to change. It needs structure. Then I did some activities to support this interview, such as interview drawings, where instead of saying their answer, they need to draw a symbol as a representation of their answer. A mindfulness activities of their childhood home, inspired by the book House as a Mirror of the Self, and of course a room tour, where I see their space that they are right now reflecting their own identity. But not all the methods work for everybody. The people I'm working with are different from myself and each other. We come from different places, with different family backgrounds, different story to tell, different ages, although we come from the same school. as I collect some stories and I start thinking about the design, I found another head scratcher. Like, how can I turn someone's love of their aunt's cheesecake into an element of design? Or like how someone's family acceptance be interpreted as a design of a room. But trust me, the latter one is easier. As I pitched the ideas to one of my friends, she said, "You don't have much control over the design. It's about our identity after all, and you cannot decide us how to we respond ourselves." And she was right. My role is only to become a mediator between the space and themselves. So the design become a collaboration. Another discovery from my project is that everybody have their own issue. People have different goals to be who they truly are, whether it's freedom, family, or acceptance. And this has become the base of my project. Well, before I talk to Ducklet, my first thought is that her room would be filled with anime posters and games, because that's what I know she'd like and what's make her feel comfortable. But once I heard her story, I got a clear feeling that family is the primary importance of her. So I designed a living room in which they can spend their time together more. It's saying, the glass house is similar to my house back in Bhutan, where we usually gather to enjoy sunset. The couches and circle tables are a place for my grandparents to rest on and see us, their grandchildren, play board games and Uno as we used to do in the past. The bookshelf and the anime poster is a representation of myself. While I found both books and anime comforting, I also learned a lot from both media. Arabelle's room is a library because it's filled with things I love. I've always been fascinated with stories. I can live another life and see from different perspectives. The kites in the ceiling are a representation of a Sankranti festival, a festival to celebrate Telugu's New Year, where I usually play with my cousin, playing kites, and my family will always bring delicious food. The sweets bar in the corner of the library is a representation of my love for my aunt's cheesecake and pecan pie in Michigan. A place I've visited every year, it becomes a constant thing for the 16 years of my life. Front room is a grunge themed attic. This is a place where I can relax and express myself. There's a foosball table in the middle of the room and a lounge chair in the balcony. Represent my love of football and the memory of playing football with my grandfather. The wall is covered with metal poster, a genre of music when I feel joyful, make me feel happy and excited. When I'm angry or upset, it helps me release my emotion. The vanity table in the corner is a recent interest of mine, as it allows me to express myself with makeup and fashion, as a representation of my sexuality and personality. And lastly, my room. A study and an art room. The first floor is a is a usual image that you see of me. A person who likes to learn and be creative. These rooms allowed me to draw, to create art, and basically creating anything of my interest. The bookshelf is a connection to my roots. It's an honor to my grandparents. The statues, the white and brown of Jogja's batik, and the mini bicycle is a representation of the culture, wisdom, and perseverance of the Javanese culture, my childhood. The second floor is not an easy step to go up to. It fills with things that I denied about myself. The chaotic and wild angel. But it also fills with art. When I tried to transform my pain into a painting or a poem, to see the beauty in me, this beauty of the darkness, and finally accept myself. As you see, a place of home is different for each of us. In this current pandemic condition, home has become an important place. The physical space that we called home becomes a place where we spend most of our times. This place needs to be supported of our identity. If not, then it will become house of a trap instead of a safe haven. But like you see, not everybody have the privilege to have a place that is comforting, that welcome them to just put their guard down, to say, this is who I am. Many have fled their home because what used to be a place of heaven becomes a place of danger. Maya Angelou once said, the egg of home lives in all of us, a place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. The place of home need to be cultivated, decorated, built with our memories, our stories of what make us who we are, to become a place that accepts ourselves in our joy or pain, and make us be truly ourselves. From there, you can bring the home inside to the outside. Thank you.
Nearly 14 years ago today, I had my first school day. There I am, a little girl with a big backpack standing in front of what seemed like an enormous concrete building, one that would shape me into the person I would become. This building is where children's minds are shaped and molded into society's standards. I walked into that building eager and excited to learn. However, a few years later, I had become the reason I'm doing this talk right now. I had become so unhappy in my education. In my first few years at school, my view towards the world had completely shifted. I went from a little girl who was happy and excited to learn to someone who had gotten lost in the system, constantly looking for a way out. My way of expressing that I felt lost was by testing the boundaries. I would bother teachers and stretch the system to its limits, just to pass some time. I didn't want to learn. I didn't make any friends. I didn't feel normal. I felt different. And feeling different in a world that is based around fitting in is difficult, especially for a 10-year-old. And when this 10-year-old girl had finally started making some friends, she was told she had to leave. Moving to green school in 6th grade is one of the hardest things I've had to do. I remember laying in bed every night for months before we left. And every night, my dad would have to give me 2 reasons why I should go to Bali. But once the time finally came, and once my parents had dragged me onto that plane, a new chapter had begun. When I first arrived, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know anyone, I didn't speak the language, and there was no way I trusted the education system. I remember my first day at green school perfectly. We sat in a circle, and Pak Noan asked everyone to say our name together with a word starting with the same letter. But when he got to me, I didn't know what to say. I felt out of control and embarrassed. I got stressed and I felt the pressure rising. But nobody laughed at me. Nobody got angry or looked at me with disappointment. Instead, everyone, including the teacher, helped me look for a word that I liked. I remember the feeling of acceptance, feeling part of a whole while still being myself. From that moment on, I understood that education is something I have control over. I had the chance to start over, to learn in a new way. All throughout middle school, I learned I have control over my education. I got to pick my own classes and choose my own projects. For the first time ever, I was happy in my education. But near the end of 9th grade, we had some news. We were moving back to Holland, and I would have to adapt all over again. This time, to a traditional Dutch high school. I mean, I had time to mentally prepare myself. And I strongly believe that with all the green school knowledge I had gained over the past 4 years, I should be able to survive in a place that had once made me so unhappy. But as you're probably all thinking, it didn't go as smooth as I'd hoped. Instead, I found myself in a deep downward spiral, reaching my limit within the first 6 months. I was so frustrated and confused. Why did nobody care about what was going on in the world around them? Why was the way I dressed so much more important than what I had to offer? Why didn't some of the teachers know my name? And why didn't I know theirs? I didn't feel connected to the people around me. Instead, I felt alone again. Near the end of the first year, I decided I was going back to green school. No matter what, I was going to make it happen. I set a goal for myself, something I could look forward to. And with the help of Ibu Leslie and a lot of hard work, I find myself at green school this year, in the happiest state I've ever been. But why? Why am I so happy here? What is it? Is it the bamboo, the temperature, the people, or is it just simply personal preference? I came here on a mission to find out. I want to know how I found my happiness in education systems. I'm sharing my story through a professionally shot documentary. I knew from the beginning I wanted to create something immortal, so a documentary seemed like a great place to start. I had the privilege of working together with professional filmmaker Sasha van Doorn, who helped and supported me through every bump and milestone. I'm so grateful for her. She let me get my message on film while teaching me about the process and the equipment along the way. And with a lot of constructive criticism and trust, we have created something I'm super proud of. However, a documentary doesn't make itself. The process has taken me a full year, working on it every day in one way or another. Whether I'm organizing meetings, setting up film shoots, signing papers, or writing voiceovers. We obviously had to face some setbacks in the filming process. Like, I wasn't allowed to film some of my teachers at my school in Holland. And the school itself didn't want to cooperate with filming either. Not even like anonymous shots of hallways and classrooms. But after a lot of back and forth emails, I finally have something to show. Here's a teaser to give you some idea of what I've been working on.
Diep in je hart was je gewoon heel ongelukkig. Je was heel ongelukkig. Je was boos, je vertrouwde het niet.
Jij wilde echt vrij wilde jij. Dat was eigenlijk alleen maar het enige wat je wilde.
If I had a button where I could implode or explode the world of education, the entire industry, as long as no one got hurt, I would without hesitation hit that button right now and get rid of the entire education system.
I think more recently, not just me, but also society has begun to question why do we go to school?
Ik ga naar school omdat het moet. Nou, ik ga naar school omdat, ja, het moet eigenlijk. Op het moment beleef ik nogal veel stress. Slapeloosheid, heel veel stress. Het idee dat ik onderdeed voor wat ik eigenlijk kan. Want het is echt heftig hier in Nederland.
I go to school because I actually really enjoy it, socializing with my friends, but I think it's also a nice way to educate yourself and make yourself a more well-rounded person, knowing more about the world.
Dit is gewoon jouw verhaal. En wat je eigenlijk ermee wil, is gewoon te zorgen dat er meer kinderen in Nederland eigenlijk gelukkig worden. Hè? Dat we kijken van hoe kunnen we nou een beetje van dit hele verhaal naar Nederland in het schoolsysteem brengen. Zodat meer kinderen gelukkig zijn op school.
Through this documentary, I hope to inspire people to make that necessary change in education systems take place. You can follow me on Instagram at Educating Happiness to help spread the word. By now, I can imagine most of you starting to think, so, how do we make education a happier place? Through the process, I have come up with a 5-step plan to improve general happiness in education systems. But I want to start by saying, everyone's journey to happiness is different. There is not one solution. The key is finding the right combination for every individual. The first step is allowing students to develop a positive relationship with nature. Being outside and exploring in an active environment allows students to build confidence and gain a deeper understanding of themselves and of their surroundings. What people often forget is that we are nature. We are an expression of nature. Through modern developments and generations of teaching kids in closed concrete buildings, we have gotten separated from our roots, which often results in people feeling isolated or lost. By getting back in touch with nature through gardening or sustainability projects, or simply just being outside, you give students the opportunity to get back in touch with themselves. Secondly, experiential learning. This is when students gain skills and knowledge by stepping outside of the traditional education system and learning by doing. Experiential learning allows students to step outside of their comfort zones and learn new skills by being put in new and challenging situations, often requiring them to think critically and making real-life decisions, also preparing them for the future. Thirdly, having ownership and freedom over your own learning. Allowing students to pick their own classes and choose their own projects allows them to develop as an individual. When students have a voice in what they get to learn, they are more likely to be happy and motivated in those subjects. When you give students ownership over their own learning, you give them ownership over their own future. Then respect. Respect is crucial in a happy and a successful education. If you, as a student, don't feel respected by your teachers, it is very unlikely you are going to respect them, making it very difficult to learn from each other. Respect is also one of the main differences I came across between Bali and Holland. In Bali, I felt respected and valued in and out of school. In Holland, this hasn't always been the case. Especially in education, I have never felt the same level of respect that I did in Bali. This represents itself in the way students and teachers interact. Which brings me to my fifth and final point. Student-teacher relationships. This is something I want to stress the most. The importance of a respectful relationship between a student and a teacher can mean the difference between a happy and an unhappy education. By a respectful relationship, I mean that students and teachers are seen as equals, as people who learn from each other. Teachers need to get to know their students, know their talents, their passions. Like I said before, the system needs to bend to the needs of every individual. This includes the teachers. If they are given more freedom in what they get to teach, they get the opportunity to build more deeper and meaningful relationships with their students, resulting in a more positive experience for both of them. How do you expect students to be learning if they aren't having fun in their education? We have been teaching entire generations to obey and think in systems instead of thinking outside the box and embracing their own creativity and talents. How do you expect my generation to fix all your problems if you are teaching me the same thing you were taught? We aren't teaching kids about current and future issues like food shortages, pollution of all kinds, racism, assault, depression, mental health, the list goes on. My generation has the opportunity to change everything. But you have the responsibility to open our minds and stimulate us to think differently, because our ideas and inventions are going to shape the future. I am one of the few people fortunate enough to step outside of the traditional education system. I am one of the few people fortunate enough to be happy in my education. I am one of the few people fortunate enough to have ownership over my own learning and therefore ownership over my own future. I want to inspire you to take this information and find what makes you happy in your education. I have found my happiness. Now it's your turn. Thank you.
Why do I run? Up until today, I was nervous. Not because I knew I was going to speak in front of my dad or into this camera. I was nervous because I still didn't have an answer. An answer to that question that has been at the back of my mind since the beginning of the year. Why do I run? At the start of brainstorming our Greenstone ideas, I felt completely lost. I didn't think I had an interesting passion like some of my friends. See, at Green School, I've been surrounded by amazing musicians, filmmakers, activists, and architects. I wanted to stand out in a community filled with incredibly talented people. I chose to start running, to become popular, to gain recognition, and to prove that I belonged at Green School. But that's not why I continue to run. Why do I run? At first I thought I knew, but as the year progressed and the more I trained and the more I experimented with different ideas, the further I seemed to get from answering that question. I didn't know that committing to training would turn out to be more difficult than the run itself, what experiences would come my way, or how much I would change throughout the year. Why did I feel so determined to put myself through months of difficult training? the monotony of running kilometer after kilometer, or the possible injuries I could get through repeated stress. Running a marathon in itself is no small feat, but to do 2.5 times the distance, the same distance from Ahmed to Uluwatu, I could be called insane. As the year progressed and I approached the halfway point in my Greenstone journey, I still didn't have an answer to that question. Now, not only was I becoming stressed out with trying to find that answer, but I was becoming increasingly stressed with school. Trying to graduate with good grades, ironing out those last-minute issues, and all the other problems seniors experience during their last couple months of school led me to the idea that I was running because I was trying to prove something to my parents. I felt like I needed to show how strong and mentally and physically capable I was by completing some big challenge. Not only that, but I felt like I was competing for attention with my brother. My brother is an amazing tennis player, and he has been at the center of attention in our family for a while. Normal conversations usually included tennis planning. We would talk about new tennis gear, and we would go to his matches to cheer him on. Over time, I became increasingly envious of my brother. Envious that he had found an activity that he loved spending hours on. I was envious of his confidence, his determination, never giving up when it got difficult. But as time went on, I learned that I was confusing that envy with inspiration. I was inspired by my younger brother. He had found something that he loved and that he could spend hours doing. He wasn't afraid if he lost a match or would give up, and he always kept going. I had spent so much time trying to find an answer to validate why I was running, but I wasn't trying to find that answer for myself. Instead, I was trying to find that answer for my parents, my teachers, and ultimately for my Greenstone. But why do I run? As March rolled by and 2020 decided to turn for the worst, everything changed. My whole world got flipped upside down, but I had a moment of clarity. Having to leave Bali to be with my family, I left my home and my friends behind. Moving to Singapore, replacing green school's jungle with a concrete one. I was isolating myself from all the previous distractions of my normal life. I couldn't go hang out with friends, I couldn't go to the movies, and I couldn't go on adventures. I was in a void with nothing but myself and a lot of spare time. But that was exactly what I needed. Not having trained in months, I'd almost completely given up with my Greenstone. And it wasn't until this point that I truly realized how big of a challenge I was facing. This was my Everest. And for the first time, I felt like I was standing at base camp, looking up, ready to take on this massive challenge. My parents, naturally worried about my health and not wanting to injure myself, said that failing can be part of my Greenstone. But that was not an option. I had to see this project through to the end. I needed to finish what I set out to do and what I told everyone I was going to do. And that was the moment I realized I was no longer running for my Greenstone, but I was running because I chose to. A new beginning. That's what I titled my first run since January, since leaving Bali, and I felt like I was truly starting over. But this time, everything was different. Training flew by like a movie montage. I felt like I was eating better, my mood improved, and I was building a routine that I was proud of. I was beginning to feel that sense of passion and determination that I admired in my brother, passing by milestone after milestone. And over time, I became more and more comfortable with being alone in my thoughts, enjoying the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement over and over and over again. And as if in a trance, The last few weeks of my training flew by like a breeze. And then I made it. Camp 4, the last place climbers sleep at before making their final push to the summit. Over the last 2 months, I had run over 535 kilometers, accumulating over 89 hours of non-stop running. But I still wasn't able to answer that question. Why do I run? In the last week of training before my big race, I had a meeting with Pak Shannon's brother. He's an amazing runner and an ultramarathon coach. He asked me that exact same question, and I couldn't answer him. I told him, I hope I find that out during the race. As the day of my 100K race approached, and I was laying out all the food, electrolytes, spare socks, and blister packs that I would be needing, I couldn't fully comprehend that this was it. I had made it to the starting line, and that was half of the challenge done. Not a lot of people who set out these big goals can go through with the training and overcome obstacles that they encounter. But I had made it, and now it was time to finish the job. I tied up my shoes and counted down the final seconds to 5:30 p.m. And then I was off. I immediately got into a comfortable pace, and I was quickly joined by Fin Tiong. Being the only other person I had seen from Green School in over 3 months, I was filled with a sense of energy. We talked like no time had passed, and my first 20 kilometers flew by like a breeze. But as the sun set and the kilometers continued to tick away, and I was nearing that halfway mark, the distances began to feel longer. Everything felt more and more difficult, and my legs were aching more than ever. I could identify every muscle, tendon, and ligament in my feet and legs. But I never stopped. At some points, I would walk, and at others, I would take breaks to put my feet up, but I always got back up and kept on going. As the sun finally came up, I realized I was coming close to the end. I had run for over 14 and a half hours at this point and had only 15 kilometers left to go. I felt like the finish line was finally in reach. As I completed my last lap around Singapore's Marina Bay, I looked back to everything that brought me to this moment. All of the strength and determination it took, having to overcome challenges and obstacles, all the help from my parents, my brother, Pak Shannon, Pak Matt, Daniel, and all the support from my friends and teachers. That's what made me strong enough to make it to this point. Not everyone who runs 100-kilometer races can make it to the finish line. The sun was blazing hotter than ever, but I was nearly there. 2 kilometers left. I could barely process what was happening anymore. I looked down at my feet and they were still moving, but I was no longer in control of them. 1 kilometer left. I ran as if I hadn't done 99 kilometers before, my feet aching, but I ignored that pain. 500 meters left, making that final approach to where I began 17 hours earlier. Then it was 200 meters. As I turned that last corner and ran up the stairs like that scene in Rocky, I could see the finish line. A sketchy dollar store ribbon strung across 2 lines, and my mom waving a Canadian flag. 0 meters left. I was done. Too tired to cry and too exhausted to celebrate or to even think. But I knew I had finished. 101 kilometers, 380 meters, 17 hours, 17 minutes, and 52 seconds of running. Even now, as I read these numbers out, I can barely believe what I was able to accomplish. Looking back to last year, I could never see myself running anything like this, much less finish. As I learned the hard way, saying you're going to run 100 kilometers and actually doing it are 2 worlds apart. But crossing that finish line didn't just mean the end of the race. It also meant the end of Greenstone's, my high school journey, and my childhood experience. Over the past year, I had learned so much about who I was, my limits and how to overcome them, who I wanted to be and what I wanted to leave behind. I learned that I wasn't running for attention or to make people proud of me. And now I finally felt like I could answer that question. Why do I run? I run to escape the stress and chaos of everyday life, to be lost in my thoughts, the sound of my breath, and the beauty of nature. I run to challenge my limits, to build confidence and to be proud of what I'm capable of, to enjoy the journey and discover new things about me and how I want to live my life. I run because it's fun and I enjoy the struggle and the pain. Why do I run? I run because I want to, and the answer was always that simple. Thank you.
This is me. My name is Tijn van der Dickenberg. I'm 18 years old. I grew up on a little farm in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in the Netherlands. I grew up with both my parents, my brother and sister. I was a happy little kid. There was nothing that bothered me much. I liked hanging out with my friends, going on hikes, and riding my bike around the property. I've always had parents that supported me to do what I most enjoyed. I've always had lots of freedom and I'm very grateful growing up on a farm. One of my favorite memories is my father actually teaching me how to ride a bike and the first real sense of freedom it gave me. I asked my dad Henk recently about how he feels about freedom. To him, freedom is being able to go wherever you want to go and do whatever you want to do without any limitations. He said he felt most free traveling with the family, exploring new corners of the world, and finding new places. He didn't have much freedom when he was younger. His dad always had clear expectations. He wanted Henk to make money by becoming a businessman. That's why he chose to study what he did. He always felt a lot of pressure from his dad to do well in school and get a job aimed at getting the most money. Raising us, he didn't want to put any pressure on us. He didn't want us to get the child that he had. So he always made sure to give us lots of freedom to pursue our interests, to do what we were interested in, the opposite of his dad. I've always felt his support, although it wasn't always easy for him to let go of what he was raised to believe. So when my mom suggested that we should move to Bali to break the routine of our lives in Holland, my father actually saw it as an opportunity to stop living in the expectations of his dad. So he let someone else manage his real estate business, and the next year, we boarded a flight to Bali. From the moment I arrived in Bali, I was shocked by all the motorbikes, and yet I couldn't wait to start driving myself. The memory I have of the first time driving a motorbike in Bali, I remember feeling so free, and that I could go anywhere I wanted. I loved driving through the peaceful rice fields, as well as the chaotic roads in Denpasar. I loved that freedom now meant that I didn't have to rely on anyone to get places. So if you fast forward, after 2 years of driving motorbikes on the island of the gods, I wanted to understand how they worked. So I bought a small motorbike to take apart and reassemble, and I quickly got to work. This project turned out to be a lot more fun than I would have thought. I loved riding them, but I'd never expect to want to work on motorbikes, let alone enjoy it so much. After not taking one, but 2 small motorbikes apart, I wanted to go even bigger. I wanted to understand more complex motorbikes. I wanted to build a custom motorcycle. I had found the perfect bike to customize, and I was all ready to get started. But then suddenly everything changed when the COVID-19 pandemic struck. Quickly our family decided to return back to the Netherlands, and my project was put on hold. I was concerned mostly because I had chosen this project to be the basis of my Greenstone. This is a BMW R87, an 800cc 4-stroke road motorcycle made by BMW. My dad bought this bike when he was 21 and has been attached to it ever since. With this motorcycle, he felt a new kind of freedom, being able to go anywhere he wanted to go, leaving behind all expectations. He would go on the trips all over Europe. When I was a kid, I would always look up to him when he drove his BMW. I was always convinced that I was going to be like him one day, sitting in the saddle and feeling the freedom. As soon as we landed back in the Netherlands, he admitted that it was finally time for him to let go of his beloved BMW. So as soon as I bought it from him, we were both excited. Him because he loved seeing me start new projects, and I because a childhood dream was coming true, and my Greenstone was saved. I transformed a shipping container into my garage, where I could work on the bike every day. I didn't waste any time and got to work pulling my motorbike apart. Every day that I open those doors and see my BMW in the shipping container, I get excited. Excited to tackle the next problem. Sandblasting, engine build, painting. Every day is a new challenge. Challenge. It's just about starting something. In fact, since starting this project, I've learned that it's also not being attached to the outcome, that anything can happen at any moment. As I'm pulling apart my motorbike, I've been thinking a lot about freedom, about what freedom means to me. I've always felt that motorbikes and freedom are connected, but I could never answer why. I realized motorbikes are an escape, but from what? I've never found expressing my emotions easy, other than the happy ones. I'd rather just be the happy guy, bring up the mood everywhere I go, with friends, and especially at home. I like to keep things easy. I'd rather not deal with any anger or any negative emotions. I've gotten really good at always coming up with reasons that they don't matter. Anytime I feel any negative emotions, I just hop on a motorbike and go for a ride. Get my brain organized, take space, just think. And I always return as a happy guy, the part of me I feel I should be. I asked one of my best friends what freedom means to him, and he said, "Freedom becomes more important the older you get. It's one of life's greatest learning curves. It is important, especially to young people, because it allows them to grow into a better person. It's important to me because having freedom has led me into my passions." That is something I really resonate with. Freedom has a massive learning curve. Having it when you're young can lead you to doing things you love, but it can be the difference between making a living pursuing your passion, working a 9 to 5 in a cubicle, or going into business to please your father. When I think about it, I'm so grateful that my parents always supported me and gave me the encouragement to doing things I love. That's how I found my passion for filmmaking. I started filmmaking when I was 7, making little goofy videos with my friends. As my filmmaking progressed, I started to get a little recognition. Requests began to come in from the community and people that I knew for me to make videos. The freedom to make films has gotten me further in life than anything else yet. I'm only 18 and I can't believe that I've already been given the opportunity to shoot commercials and short documentaries in Jordan and India. I'm so grateful for those experiences, what I've learned along the way, and cannot wait to get out in the world and make more films. Coming back to emotions, I realized that filmmaking has been the main way that I felt comfortable to express myself. Having full creative control with film is always something I really value. Hours and hours editing, moving things around until the message is right. This might be why filmmaking is so important to me. But people, family, teachers have always asked me, why filmmaking? What about filmmaking is it that you like so much? And I could never really answer why. Until now. You heard it? I found my why. It's a safe outlet for my emotions. As I'm pulling apart the bike, I see that I'm pulling apart myself too, seeing what part does what and which part affect the others. Working on motorcycles has given me a lot of time to think. Before I started thinking so much about freedom, I had always just taken it for granted. But now I'm figuring out it means so much more to me. It's a big part of my life. Freedom to do what I love doing most, to make my own decisions and to follow my passion. But I also need freedom to escape, to reflect on my emotions, and to see that it's okay to not always be the happy guy. Freedom is also freedom to be vulnerable. A lot of adolescent boys don't show their emotions because they're supposed to be a man. Society's taught us not to cry, to toughen up. As part of my research, I watched a documentary called The Mask You Live In. It's about adolescent boys don't being able to show their emotions and the long-term effects that has on their mental health, ending up in aggression, depression, or even suicide. The film opened my eyes as I related to some of it. I noticed that I wear my mask quite often. It's the easiest thing to do. It's taking the easy route. I tell myself that my emotions don't matter. Better show up as the happy guy and keep the mood up for everyone. But if I'm telling myself that my emotions don't matter, I'm also saying that I don't matter. Now that I have a clear understanding of what freedom means to me, the opportunity to be more vulnerable in revealing my truth and emotions, I can change the way I deal with it. Maybe from here, I'll take another route to find new ways, learning to not always take the easy one, to see the value of new challenges along the way. Up until now, my way of dealing with negative emotions has been to escape and control situations. My default has been to retreat and get my thoughts in order, but I've never been able to fully take off my mask. That is something I need to learn. This isn't going to be something that happens overnight. I need to work on this for the next few months, or even years, seeing what works and what doesn't. As I put the last few pieces of this BMW together, I am aware of how many more pieces I am made of. The next challenge ahead of me is to buy a van and live in it for a year, traveling around another corner of the world, enjoying the type of freedom that both my father and I value so much. This has been a dream of mine since I was 7 years old, and as usual, I have my parents' full encouragement. Traveling alone is going to give me a lot of time with just me, where I don't have to wear the mask at all. This time, I won't be escaping, and I won't need to get my thoughts in order. I'll be getting myself back in a new way. It'll give me a lot of time to reflect and embrace more of my emotions, not just the happy, uplifting ones. At the end of this journey down this new road, I hope to arrive at a place where I can embrace my vulnerabilities, be more open with my emotions, and be a true version of myself. I'm aware that I'm going to take this with me for the rest of my life, and I'll keep learning what freedom means to me along the way. Thank you.
My Greenstone all began with these pants. I will admit I have always loved shopping for clothes. So a few years ago when I found these pants online, I immediately began thinking about how I was going to convince one of my parents to buy them for me. Until I saw the price. And knew there was no way they would even consider it. I could already hear my mom saying, "Tallulah, you're a 15-year-old girl. I'm not buying you $300 pants." These pants are made by Stoned Immaculate. They're a small brand that makes vintage-inspired clothes in Los Angeles, California. Along with being eco-conscious, they prioritize making small batch and ethically made garments. Doesn't everyone want to buy clothes that are super cute and ethically made? It's a win-win situation, and everyone wants to feel good about what they are buying. This is where my journey truly took off, as I look further into the human desire to feel good about our actions and the things we consume. Now keep that in mind, and let's talk about sustainability. I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, a fairly progressive and earth-loving beach town. My family shopped at farmers markets, we used reusable water bottles and containers, we composted and even grew our own vegetables. This upbringing gave me a drive to support good causes and taught me the importance of buying responsibly. But despite all this, we all knew it took much more to live a truly sustainable life. But what exactly is this sustainable lifestyle we all talk about? Does it mean eating vegetarian, wearing consciously made clothes, driving an electric vehicle, recycling, reducing plastic use, or even attending green school? The Cambridge Dictionary defines sustainability as the quality of being able to continue over a period of time. A sustainable journalism site called YouMatter gives a collective societal definition as the processes and actions through which humankind avoids the depletion of natural resources, which is influenced by the way societies are organized, to keep an ecological balance so that society's quality of life doesn't decrease. Most simply, it's the capacity to endure. It's the ultimate global goal, but how do we reach that goal? Alan Atkinson, a well-versed sustainable leader, created the popular COMPASS model, which defines the 4 key variables of true sustainability as nature, well-being, society, and economy. Through this lens, we start to see the many dimensions of approaching this phenomenon. I am privileged enough to be able to afford a semi-sustainable life. But those pants made me reflect on this way of life, and as I started to see the bigger picture, I began to realize that modern sustainability is not what I believed it to be. Similar to Stoned Immaculate, more and more niche sustainable brands are popping up in the global fashion industry, such as Reformation, Selva Negra, and Kowtow. They support a good cause and may use ethical work systems, but their clothing tends to be drastically unaffordable to the majority of our population. These predominantly high price points demand questioning. Is sustainability becoming a trend and simply being used as a beneficial marketing strategy by the societal structures that it's aimed to change? I then stumbled across a few articles by Forbes magazine and the Harvard Business Review, which analyzed and discussed the profitability of sustainability. This glaring contradiction is where I stopped asking questions. Our modern concept of sustainability is inadequate and short-sighted. Following this misguided marketing trend, globally renowned companies are starting to rebrand using this new trend of the sustainability ethos and reaping the financial benefits of the movement. As an example, Levi's created their brand Redone, which refurbishes vintage jeans in the USA. By recycling old denim, reducing water consumption, and not using harmful chemicals, Redone is proudly part of the sustainable fashion movement. But again, their prices fall between $175 and $495, making them unaffordable to the majority and further pushing sustainability into a marketable luxury lifestyle. And this rebranding does not necessarily lead to a sustainable revolution within the company. Many are still using their usual lines of production, overproducing their now sustainable product, and using a new array of harmful chemicals. In human psychology, this phenomenon is called compensation. In order to connect their buyers, companies are simply telling them what they want to hear, and sometimes adopting a couple sustainable concepts to compensate for their many poor practices. Because remember what I said earlier, we all want to feel good about what we are buying. Stepping back from fashion, this marketing trend of unaffordable sustainability and compensation runs throughout all sectors of business. Lay's has their Simply Organic chip line, or Kraft's Smile, It's Organic campaign. can these iconic junk foods really be organic and chemical-free? Greenwashing and marketing trends are common in the organics industry. Companies blatantly market with hues of green and rustic fonts to make people unconsciously think of the environment and doing good in relation to their product. And not only is their packaging deceiving, but also their labeling. As big business pushes into the organics industry, they are lobbying change in agricultural practices and certifications, using new organic chemicals, still not growing nutritious foods, and only continuing to deplete soils and water supply. This is obviously not an example of joining the sustainable movement, but rather using it to sell a product. In technology, there's Apple's With the Environment in Mind campaign that features their electronic recycling program and efforts to be sustainable, like calculating their carbon footprint and using recycled aluminum. Nevertheless, Apple was just sued for $500 million for installing noxious viruses through updates onto old iProducts, forcing consumers to buy new devices by undermining the performance of their current ones. Despite their advertising, corporations in their current profit model are not producing sustainable products and are not helping to produce a sustainable culture. They are continuing to deplete Earth's resources for short-term profit and covering up their unhealthy production processes with a disjointed sustainable practice and a matching advertising campaign targeted towards a small part of our population with the financial means to afford it. This is not progressing towards a global goal and is certainly not acceptable. Sustainability is not a trend to be profited from. It's a balancing of money and power so that all can continue happy and healthy over a long period of time. Sustainable compensation will not save our planet. It's time big businesses recalibrate their financial markets so that truly sustainable products can be normalized and everyone can afford them. Because inequality is not sustainable. America is infamous for its obese population, but did you know that many of the obese and overweight citizens live in suburban and low-income areas where they have to travel up to 4 hours in some cases just to access a grocery store that offers any fresh food? How can we expect the majority of the country to support local farmers and buy organic when fresh vegetables aren't even available in town, and the price of these quality foods would consume the majority of their paycheck? Similarly, how can we expect our population to support sustainable brands and fight fast fashion when the price would cost an unreasonable percentage of their monthly wages? We are living in a modern disconnect. A disconnect between classes, a disconnect between privilege, and even a disconnect between the idea of choice and the actual ability to choose. The more I read, researched, and talked about the apparent privilege of sustainability in our society, the more I was outraged. How could I have been so blindsided by this modern falsification, and how can we launch on this sustainable movement while leaving so many people behind? After analyzing the flaws of modern business and economy, while also considering my position as a teenage girl, it was easy to be intimidated by the size of systematic change. But I want to make a small difference in the misguided industry I have had a lifelong passion for, the fashion business. With the seemingly never-ending list of unsustainable practices, I chose to stick to the basics and focus on fabrics. First, I looked into making natural dyes and organic cotton, but neither of these felt like they offered the solutions that would be impactful enough. Until one day, while I was sweating and hiking on a hash walk through Bali, I happened to meet this woman named Karen. And while I was explaining all the pros and cons of my natural dyes to her, she said to me, "Have you heard of biomimicry? Why not create a fabric that doesn't have to be dyed at all?" Although I thought it was crazy and impossible at first, It turns out that Karen is an advisor, judge, and mentor in the Biomimicry Institute. And the next few months of my life would be dedicated to pursuing her question. Defined by the Biomimicry Institute, biomimicry is a practice that learns from and mimics the strategies found in nature to solve human design challenges and find hope along the way. And biomimicry gave me just that, by representing the exact comprehensive approach I was looking for. The transformation it represents spans all industries, is applicable to all people, and is focused on solidarity. Biomimicry is about valuing nature for what we can learn, not what we can extract, harvest, or domesticate like so many companies are doing today. This system gave me hope that one day we can achieve a sustainable transformation. These are the 10 principles of nature, which are an amalgamation of some of nature's most common patterns and principles. To me, they seem like the guidelines to the perfect society we're looking for. Without marketing incentive, nature recycles and leaves zero waste. Creates without force and toxic substances, keeps it local, and only uses safe and renewable resources. Nature also optimizes, not only by making just what it needs, but by embracing the potential of diversity. So, in February, I teamed up with Karen and my dad, and we began working through the biomimicry process, which guides researchers through holistic, sustainable discoveries. We started with our primary intentions to create a colorful fabric that fit the market and was affordable to all, using life-friendly chemistry and sustainable processes. Since then, we've studied the likes of chameleons, birds, butterflies, beetles, bees, and spiders, learning how they've mastered color and made their beautiful patterns. When looking through nature, sustainable practices have endless potential for amazing innovation, like a fabric that's antibacterial, waterproof, and self-colored. I would have never imagined I could create such a thing. Now we are here, and focusing on consolidating, finding patterns, and deep diving into the micromechanisms. I am so excited for the future of this project as we continue to discover inspiring information and work towards a new type of textile. Next year, we hope to apply to the Biomimicry Institute's Global Design Challenge, which rewards grants and mentorship to make our idea into a reality. Although I am not finished with this project, there is so much it has already taught me about myself. My Greenstone journey started in the corporate, financial, and sociological aspects of sustainability, but unexpectedly landed me deep into the wonders of nature, rekindling my childhood reverence. For billions of years, Mother Nature has been adapting to her surroundings, learning, supporting, and finding balance in the world. If she isn't the master at regeneration and endurance, I don't know what is. To me, sustainability has come to mean replicating nature, which includes caring for the environment, living with integrity, and prioritizing equality. We are too often told and sold the meaning of sustainability without even noticing. In the process, we have lost the fundamental aspects of our movement, and it has left us disconnected from one another and the true purpose of sustainability. Disillusioned by incomplete versions of a sustainable culture, and still searching for a transformation of values from short-term profit to a future of health and universal prosperity. Our greatest sustainable teacher is right outside our doors in Mother Nature. Please take a moment to look at the system that has carried the solution all along. It's time to reevaluate what sustainability truly means to you. Thank you.